He wasn't a king. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't have an army, a throne, or a crown. He was a teenager, torn from his homeland, stripped of his name, carried in chains to the most powerful empire on earth. A boy with nothing left, except his God. And that would be enough. This is the story of Daniel, not just a man who survived a lion's den, but a man whose unshakable faith shook empires. A man who saw kingdoms rise and fall, and stood firm through every single one. A story of courage when compromise would have been easier, of prayer when silence would have been safer, of trust when everything around him said give up. His name was Daniel, and God was not done with him yet. It began with devastation. In 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, the most feared ruler in the ancient worlds, marched his armies against Jerusalem. He didn't just conquer the city, he dismantled it. He took the sacred vessels from the house of God and carried them to Babylon, placing them in the temple of his own gods. But that wasn't all he took. Nebuchadnezzar commanded his chief official to select the best and brightest from among the Israelite captives. Young men of noble birth, physically strong, mentally sharp, quick to learn, and gifted in wisdom. They were to be trained for 3 years in the language and literature of Babylon so they could serve in the king's court. Among those chosen were 4 young men: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Immediately, the Babylonians changed their names, a deliberate act of cultural erasure, stripping away their Hebrew identities and replacing them with Babylonian ones. Daniel became Belteshazzar, Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, Azariah became Abednego. They could take his name, but they could not take his faith. Because while Daniel was being trained in every wisdom of Babylon, he made a quiet, resolute decision deep in his heart. He would not defile himself. The king had assigned them daily rations of royal food and wine, the finest in the empire. For most young men ripped from home, given palace comforts, this would have been a relief. But Daniel understood something they didn't. To eat from the king's table was more than a meal. It was an act of allegiance. Much of the royal food had been offered to Babylonian idols. To eat it was to say, I belong to Babylon now. So Daniel approached the chief official and respectfully asked for a different arrangement. Please test your servants for 10 days, Daniel said. Give us only vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food. The official was nervous. If Daniel and his friends looked worse than the others, the king would have his head. But he agreed. 10 days passed, and when they were examined, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than all the young men who had eaten the royal food. God was already at work. At the end of their 3 years of training, when they were brought before King Nebuchadnezzar himself, the king found no one equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. In every matter of wisdom and understanding, they were 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. The boy who refused to compromise had become the wisest man in the empire. In the 2nd year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that disturbed him so deeply he could not sleep. It wasn't just a dream, it felt like a message, a warning, a vision of something vast and terrifying pressing in from beyond the world he knew. He summoned all his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers and made an extraordinary demand. Tell me what I dreamed, and then tell me what it means. His wise men were baffled. No king has ever asked such a thing, they protested. Tell us the dream, and we will interpret it. But Nebuchadnezzar was unmoved. If you cannot tell me the dream, then there is only one reason: you are buying time, hoping things will change. Tell me the dream, or die. None of them could. So the king issued a decree. All the wise men of Babylon were to be executed. That included Daniel. When the soldiers came for him, Daniel didn't panic. He didn't beg. He asked calmly, "Why is the king's decree so urgent?" When he understood the situation, Daniel did something that must have seemed absurd to everyone around him. He went home, and he prayed. He asked his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. And that night, God answered. The mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. He didn't run to the king in triumph. First, he stopped and worshipped. He praised the God who gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. The God who reveals deep and hidden things. The God who knows what lies in darkness, and in whom all light dwells. Then he went before the king. No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he is asked about, Daniel said clearly. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And then, before Nebuchadnezzar's speechless court, Daniel described the dream in perfect detail. A towering statue, dazzling and enormous, with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron and feet of iron mixed with clay. Then a rock, cut from a mountain by no human hand, struck the feet of the statue. The whole thing collapsed, shattered, and the wind swept the pieces away. But the rock grew until it filled the entire earth. Nebuchadnezzar sat in silence. That was exactly the dream. Daniel explained, each material represented a kingdom. Babylon was the head of gold. After Babylon, other kingdoms would rise. But in the end, the God of heaven would establish a kingdom that would never be destroyed. The greatest king on earth fell to his knees before Daniel. "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings," Nebuchadnezzar declared. He honored Daniel with gifts, elevated him to a position of high authority, and appointed him ruler over the entire province of Babylon. The captive had become the counselor. The exile had become the second in command. Not because Daniel was clever, but because Daniel was faithful. But the story wasn't over. King Nebuchadnezzar built a towering golden statue, 90 feet tall, and sent out a decree to every province. When the music plays, everyone must bow down and worship it. Anyone who refuses will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. The music played, the people bowed, but 3 men remained standing: Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Furious informants rushed to tell the king. Nebuchadnezzar summoned them immediately, his face flushed with rage. He gave them one last chance. "If you are ready to bow down when you hear the music, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Their answer has echoed through centuries. "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up, even if he does not. Not blind optimism, not a prosperity gospel, just pure, costly, unshakable trust." The king's face contorted with fury. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. He commanded the strongest soldiers in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them in. The fire was so intense that the soldiers who threw them in were killed by the heat. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the flames, and Nebuchadnezzar watched. Then he leapt to his feet in astonishment and turned to his advisors, his voice shaking. "Weren't there 3 men we tied up and threw into the fire?" "Certainly, your majesty," they replied, "and look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. 4 men, unbound, walking freely in the fire. Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the furnace and called out, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, Kas, come out, come here." They walked out. The fire had not harmed them, not a hair singed, not a thread scorched. No smell of fire on them at all. Nebuchadnezzar stood speechless before them. Then he praised the God who had sent his angel to rescue his servants. 3 men who refused to bow came out of the fire without a single burn. Because sometimes God doesn't remove the fire. He walks through it with you. Years passed. Nebuchadnezzar died. New kings rose and fell. And eventually a king named Belshazzar came to power in Babylon. He threw a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles. And in a moment of arrogance that would cost him everything, Belshazzar ordered that the gold and silver cups taken from the temple in Jerusalem be brought out. He and his guests drank from them, laughing and toasting their gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. In that same moment, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the wall. The banquet fell silent. Belshazzar's face turned pale. His knees knocked together. His legs gave way beneath him. The words burned on the wall: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. No one could interpret it until they remembered Daniel. Daniel came before the terrified king and refused the offered gifts. He had no interest in wealth or status. Then he explained the words: Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Parsin, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, Belshazzar, king of Babylon, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. Under Darius, Daniel rose again. The new king planned to set him over the entire kingdom. But the other administrators and officials were jealous. They watched Daniel closely, searching for any fault, any corruption, any negligence. They found nothing. So they devised a plan. They knew Daniel prayed to his God 3 times a day, every single day by his open window facing Jerusalem, never hiding it, never stopping. They approached Darius with flattery and convinced him to issue a decree. For 30 days, no one could pray to any god or man except the king. The punishment for violation was death by lions. The king, pleased by the honor, signed the decree. Daniel heard about it and went home, opened his window, knelt down, and prayed, exactly as he had always done. His enemies raced to the king with the report. Darius was devastated. He spent the whole day trying to find a legal way out, but the law of the Medes and Persians could not be changed. As the sun set, Daniel was brought to the lion's den. Darius said to him quietly, his voice tight with grief, "May your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you." A stone was laid over the mouth of the den. The king went back to his palace. He fasted all night. He could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, Darius ran to the lion's den. He called out, his voice cracking, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve, continually been able to rescue you from the lions?" A voice answered from inside the darkness, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight." Daniel was lifted out of the den. No wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. King Darius then issued a decree across his entire empire. In every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. He rescues and saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. the man who would not stop praying, became the reason an entire empire praised his God. Daniel was a teenager in a foreign land. He had no power, no army, no connections. But he had something the greatest kingdoms of earth could not manufacture or destroy. A conscience he refused to compromise. A God he refused to abandon. A faith that outlasted every empire that tried to silence it. Babylon rose and fell. The Persian Empire rose and fell. But Daniel's God? Still reigning, still rescuing, still writing stories of redemption in the lives of people who dare to trust him. Even when the furnace is hot, even when the lions are hungry, even when the laws are stacked against them. Daniel's story is not just history. It is a mirror, because maybe right now you are in a foreign land of your own, a job that asks you to compromise, a culture that mocks your faith, a situation that feels like exile, a den so dark you can't see the way out. And maybe God is asking you the same thing he asked Daniel. Will you trust me anyway? Not because the fire won't be hot, not because the lions won't roar, but because the God who shut the mouths of lions and walked through fire with his servants is the same God who sees you right now, right where you are. You are not in exile by accident. You are not forgotten. You are not unseen. You are positioned for such a time as this. Because the God who turned a captive teenager into the wisest man in the most powerful empire on earth is still in the business of doing the impossible with the most unlikely of people. And your story? It isn't over yet.